on BBC Radio WM.
It's 25 to 9. Do you know anybody with dyslexia? Or maybe you have dyslexia, maybe you live with this and have to find ways around it. I know a fair bit about this because my daughter's severely dyslexic. And you're about to hear, after Peter Gabriel, a fascinating chap who is 90 years old and is an expert in dyslexia and is calling on the government to think again about how we teach our kids to read and write because he thinks we're failing them. He's on next after this. Peter Gabriel, Salisbury Hill, BBC Radio WM, talking today about dyslexia. And I wonder if this is something that you have. Maybe it wasn't called that. Maybe you struggled at school and they called it something different. Maybe you were made to feel stupid at school. Maybe it knocked your confidence. I know a fair bit about this because my daughter is dyslexic and she's just struggled all the way through school. And I got a little clip of her earlier saying that, you know, at times they would have to do spelling tests out of 100 and she'd get 1 or 2 out of 100, and then the next week she'd get 1 or 2 out of 100, and she'd have to stay in after everybody else writing out all the spellings and never really learnt them. In fact, she can't really spell a lot of these words still, and she's almost 20 and she's at university and now thriving after having a really difficult time at school. Josh was talking to us as well, Josh, the Emperor of the Black Country, about his dyslexia. And what's interesting, Josh, is much more than just reading and spelling. It's taken me a long time to learn this with Rose. So Rose, as I say, she's almost 20. She wouldn't be able to tell you a left from a right. She wouldn't be able to tell you the months of the year in sequence. You know, she doesn't actually know what order they come in. And all of these things people don't know about dyslexia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, months of the year, that's a funny one. It was only probably a couple of years ago that I could actually recite my months of the year. And I remember when I was a kid, and it's one of the first things that you learn about when you're in primary school, and people would do it, and, you know, they'd do it no problem, and then it'd come to me. And, there was sort of an embarrassment about it, so I never really addressed it, never told anyone about it. And, so that was a problem, and I only really learnt my way around that a couple of years ago. And then the left and the right thing, that's a fascinating thing as well, because, again, that was something you learn in primary school. But you find little ways round things. So for me, it's like I know that I'm left-footed. And I've almost got this weird feeling in my left leg. So if I want to sort of, you know, make reference left, right, I just think about my left foot, that type of thing. The alphabet, this is something that people struggle with in terms of being able to recite your alphabet from A to Z. And for me, I never could do my alphabet until I had a Nokia phone, and you know how on the texts you'd have A, B, C, D,
you have to
E,
go
F,
through it,
sort of thing, and that's how I learnt it, and I sort of like picture that image myself.
And for Rose, it's got a lot better since she was out of school and she went to college, completely different, and everything was different. And now at university, she just seems to be flying, whereas she really struggled at school. And you were the same.
Yeah, really similar experience. So as I said, when I was in school, they didn't recognise it, they didn't pick up on it. Not in primary school, not in secondary school, and then I went to college and I did politics, drama, media, and I was obsessed with politics. So I used to watch like loads of documentaries, and we used to have like discussions in class, and in the discussions I'd excel. I could tell you everything about UK politics, the history of UK politics, political philosophy, political economy, and I'd pretty much lead that class. But then my teacher, my lecturer, put a sort of a textbook in front of us, say it was on neoliberalism or something, and she'd say, read this and then we'll discuss it. And then she'd notice that everyone had read it, but I'm still reading ages on, and they're waiting for me. So at that point she was like, Josh, can you stay back after class? So I stayed back after class. She was like, Josh, have you ever been tested for dyslexia? I was like, no. She was like, I'm 90% certain that you're dyslexic. Sent me to this specialist, and we did this diagnostic assessment. Turned out I was, and the great thing about that is after that, it allowed me to work around my dyslexia. So, for instance, they'd give me texts a couple of days before, which would give me the time to sort of ingest and digest the information, which meant that I could proper contribute in lectures, and that changed my attitude towards education. You know, I used to kick and scream when I was going to primary school. In college, I loved it, and, you know, all because I was able to identify that and find ways around it.
Well, we're talking about this today. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for being so honest as well. We're talking to Dr. Neville Brown. He's actually 90 years old. He's Britain's oldest teacher, but he's a pioneer in dyslexia and teaching literacy to children. In fact, he founded the Maple Hayes Specialist Dyslexia School in Lichfield. It's been interesting listening to the students who go there to mark his 90th birthday, telling us how much the school has helped them.
They've given me a career that I know that I'm going to be confident enough to put myself out there and to Just have full faith in myself and know that I can do it, but it just might take a little bit of determination.
They perform really well, they help you, and it's like a way you can grasp it, and it's just perfect, really. There's nothing to fault about it. It's just really good. And the fact that they can interpretate icons with the learning, it's like it's just really get to understand it.
My brother came here before me, and he couldn't read like the red boat and the green boat before coming here, and now he's the smartest person I know. He's gone on to college and he got distinctions in engineering, and he's doing amazing. What this school's done for my family is like, I can't put words to it. It's amazing.
The pupils at Maple Hayes Specialist Dyslexia School, founded by Dr Neville Brown, who you're going to hear from in a minute, because he's 90 this month, and he's using his birthday to call for the government to have a review of the way they rely so much in schools on phonics, learning to read and write via the sounds. You know, they're obsessed with teaching you the different sounds, and he says it doesn't really work for a lot of kids, particularly dyslexic kids, and it certainly didn't work for my Rose, my daughter. She never really learnt it at all. So fascinating to get a chat with 90-year-old Dr Neville Brown, and also his son, Dr Darrell Brown, who is the current principal of Maple Hayes Specialist Dyslexia School in Lichfield.
Their problems with phonics stem mainly from very poor auditory memory span. And so if they have an auditory memory span for 3 or 4 sounds at the most, to get the right sounds, repeat them, and in the right order, then if they've got that problem, then synthetic phonics, then they can't proceed beyond very short words.
I can completely understand that, and I think my experience with my daughter, who's severely dyslexic, would be just she couldn't do it. She couldn't do phonics. It didn't make any sense to her. There would be spelling tests at primary school, and they would give them 100 words, and she would get 1 or 2. And you imagine week after week, you know, getting 1 or 2 out of 100 and then having to go over them all. And her confidence was just shot. When my daughter was in year 6, so about to go up to big school, they called a meeting with the secondary school and her primary school teacher, and they sat down together. And her primary school teacher, and I might actually get emotional when I tell this story because it was an emotional moment. He said, I've got this girl in my class and she is so eloquent. Her comprehension is incredible. She can stand in front of the class and she can tell you what she's just learned through the class and through listening. And then he said, and here is her written work. And he produced a written work, and he said, and I think you'll agree that is about the age of a 5-year-old. And as he said it, he started to well up. He was starting to cry. And he said, and I'm welling up now. And this girl's going to get lost at secondary school because they won't see that. They won't see that that's the same child. Is that kind of classic?
Yes, I mean, what we see coming into this school is the first sort of breakdown period is that sort of end of Key Stage 1, beginning of Key Stage 2, where there's much more in the classroom being delivered in written formats, whereas up and throughout Key Stage 1, a lot of it is verbal. So as more and more material gets delivered in written format, they fall further and further and further behind.
So talk to me about the alternative then, Dr Brown, because you believe that there is an alternative, and actually schools have got this wrong.
Yes. If you split words, these longer words, into meaning units called morphemes, then each morpheme can be taught, and if there are a 10-letter word, for example, that you can't possibly learn and read or spell by phonics because it's outside the auditory memory span. But if you've got 3 such morphemes in a word and you know them and you can put them together to make a word, and these parts of words appear in other words, but they may not sound anywhere near the same when they appear in other words, but the spelling patterns are there exactly the same.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I can give you an easy example as an example of the way we think about it. If you put ed on the end of a word, now there are different words in English that don't use ed as a past tense, but let's ignore that for the time being. If you put ed on the end of the word to put it in a past tense, then if you have the word hope, it becomes hoped. Posted, we've got a totally different pronunciation for that ed. So somebody who's overusing phonics, they will actually miss out on the spelling pattern and the meaning pattern that's going to help them decode words.
So what advice would you give to the government or people who are in charge of education about phonics? What would your birthday message be, Neville?
I would like to see the concentration right from the beginning on learning to write, because you're then putting your short words that you use in years 1 and 2, and you're putting these words in another memory. And then the phonics is actually meaningless.
The biggest problem which we would want to see resolved is you have a dyslexic pupil that struggles with phonics. Why are you choosing to give them more of what they're struggling with? Find something that they can do better. Find something that is matching their strength, not their area of weakness. And for us, that's what we do. We look at the meaning of the words, we look at the spelling patterns, and we don't worry too much about the sound. That comes later. It's meaning and spelling first, sound later. I was actually at school myself when my parents started this place. So I've seen pupils come through it. I've seen the changes that have been made to pupils, the increase to their confidence, the successes. You know, we've got pupils who will leave us and will still carry on learning.
One of them has even graduated and has come back to us as a teacher.
That's Dr. Neville Brown and his son Dr. Darrell Brown, who are from Maple Hayes Specialist Dyslexia School in Lichfield. It's 10 to 9.